Hi everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar today. I might just give everybody a couple more minutes just to log on and then we'll get started. Amazing. Looks like we've got plenty of you here, so we'll kick off. Hi everyone, my name is Vicky. Thank you for joining us today for our Inclusive Leadership and Re-engaging Your People webinar. I work with the Myers-Briggs company, and the topic of today's webinar appears to be an important one for many people due to we've had a large number of you registering and obviously joining us today. We'll keep everybody on mute to avoid any background noise, but we do encourage you to participate by using questions and polls. The questions box feature you'll find on your GoToWebinar panel. We want this to be as interactive as possible, so I'll be assisting with questions and comments and polls throughout the session. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and we will be sending out an email with the link to the recording, notes and additional resources within the next few days. But first, a little bit about our presenter. So the Myers-Briggs company has a 65-year history and is a mission-driven organisation where we look to inspire everyone to lead more successful and fulfilling lives. We deliver on this through our talent development consultancy services and also by offering certification in trusted psychometric assessments for those practitioners who want to bring this capability in-house. Also, we're very proud to be a benefit company, meaning that we balance our commercial goals alongside goals we have for our employees, the community, and the environment. So our presenter today is Dr. Martin Bolt. He's the Senior Director of Professional Services and a psychologist at the Myers-Briggs company. He has experience partnering with organisations in Australia and internationally, helping people to apply insights from research to areas including leadership development, executive coaching, team effectiveness, organisational change, virtual training solutions, and workplace well-being. So during this webinar, Martin will highlight key insights from our recent research and practical steps for creating inclusive workplaces where people contribute their best and feel engaged. We'll see how inclusive leadership is essential for helping people to feel connected in workplaces where remote and hybrid work is becoming the norm. And with that, I'll turn over to you, Martin.
Thanks very much, Vicky, and welcome to everyone who's taken some time to join our webinar today live. And as Vicky mentioned, we do want to make this an inclusive experience, tying in with the topic itself. And so we will be asking you to contribute or participate through our webinar today, so please be ready to do that. But it's great to see that, again, this is a well-attended session and probably highlighting again some of the things that are top of mind for leaders or businesses around inclusion. So to jump straight into it and get you involved in our session today, we're going to launch a poll which we'll ask you to all take a moment to respond to, and that is to take your mind back in time, if you can, to 2019, pre the COVID pandemic, and to think about what were the important issues you recall for people and culture parts of the world of work. And what we'll have on screen for you is from the Society of Human Resource Management. They identified 5 areas as important in 2019. So what we're going to ask you to do is choose the one that you think would come up number 1 in 2019 based on what you recall was going on at that point in time. And we'll just give everyone a moment to respond, and when we've got some answers in there, Vicky, I'll just ask you to share with us where people rank ordered most important to least out of these top 5.
Great. Well, thank you to everybody who has voted. We've hit 70%. So let's just have a quick look and I will bring up the results.
Great. Yeah, it's probably a bit of a time warp to transport ourselves back to 2019 and remember what was on the agenda. So how are the results looking? What have we got coming through?
So currently, sorry, it's just struggling to bring them up on screen, but currently we've got mental health sitting at 31%. We've got gender diversity sitting at 29%. Then flexible work schedules with 24% and 10% taking a stand on social issues.
Okay, so, and it sounded from memory there, things like mental health were jumping up top of list there. So thank you again for everyone sharing your responses there. And if I've got it correct, Vicky, was it gender diversity was number one, or is it mental health was number one?
Mental health creeped to the top at 33%, and then it was
Uh-huh.
followed by gender diversity.
Okay, excellent. So that's where people were, I guess, reflecting on where we were in 2019. I'll share with you now on screen from the research by SHRM when they were asking organisations and HR heads what were the most important issues in 2019. You can actually see top of the list, preparing for working alongside robots was right at the top of the list for everyone. So it's interesting to think about where we are with that topic and issue today. But flexible work schedules came in number two, and again, that issue probably hasn't died off. Taking a stand on social issues was very important. Gender diversity, and coming in fifth most important was mental health. So that's where things were in 2019. What we're going to do is run another quick poll with you again, and really to get everyone thinking about this year. What do you think is the most important issue out of the ones we've listed on screen? The four that we've got on screen, again, come from Society of Human Resource Management's current research. And so we'll just give everyone a moment to think about, in 2022, what is the most important people and culture issue out of these four? And again, once everyone's had a chance to respond with what they think the top one is, again, we'll have a look at what kind of results were coming through. But you can see the options there of attracting and retaining talent with hybrid work, COVID ongoing impact on safety practices, maintaining employee engagement, or increasing people leadership capabilities. So again, Vicky, when we've got some responses coming through, it'd be great to see where people's thoughts are on these key issues.
Amazing, thanks everyone. Everyone was quick off the mark with this one. And we've got a clear front runner. So we've got 50% of people have voted attracting and retaining talent with hybrid work, followed by maintaining employee engagement at 33%, and then COVID ongoing impact on safety practices and increasing people leadership capabilities, sitting with lower votes at 8 and 9%.
Great, excellent. So again, thank you everyone for participating and sharing the results there with us, Vicky. So what did the SHRM research highlight? Well, what we actually see is the number one issue, and probably not too different to what came up in our group today, is maintaining employee engagement is top of the most important issues in 2022, followed by attracting, retaining talent within a hybrid working environment, and we'll talk a bit more about that today. Obviously, COVID and its flow-on effects for the world of work and safety practices is sitting in at number three. And you can see that leadership has now hit the table at the fourth most important issue in 2022. And if we put the issues alongside each other, there are probably some themes that we can all see that run between 2019 and 2022, but priorities probably have shifted somewhat, where organizations and business leaders are now saying, how do we actually keep people engaged with us now that maybe things are moving in a way that's not the middle of the pandemic? And also, how do we attract and keep the best people that we need and have, but in a different environment with this hybrid conditions? So today, keeping some of those issues in mind, what we'll look at in our webinar is What is it about today's workplace that now requires inclusive leadership, and why is it even more important than maybe what it might have been in more recent years? We'll also look at what inclusive leaders are doing to re-engage their people. And we talk about re-engagement here because there's a sense in many parts of work and for a number of people that over the last 2 years, there might have been some disengagement or a feeling of not being part of something, largely because we all had to work in many different ways and indeed in different places than what we would have been doing before 2020. We'll look at how inclusive leadership affects decisions and performance and engagement of people at work. And we also wanted to leave everyone with some recommendations for developing inclusive leadership and how to foster a work environment where people feel included. And I'll share that some ways of doing that also via a case study of an organisation that we've recently worked with. So just to think about where we are today, the last few months have seen many changes for people's work lives. Some people have moved back to working mainly in person or maybe at a work location most or all of the time. Some people remain working remotely, either completely remotely, or for others there's been a blend where there's some in-person work with colleagues or co-workers or even clients, and followed by another portion of time working remotely or potentially the work from anywhere scenario. I think it is really important for us to remind ourselves that the research actually finds that 60% of work still involves people attending a workplace. That would be, for example, people who work in health or teaching or hospitality or even a number of manufacturing roles. So what we're really seeing is that the majority of people still are turning up to a place of work, and that's something that we need to be mindful of because other people will not be working in jobs that have the same expectation. And what does that mean for inclusion, I guess, is something to consider. We have seen, though, over the last 2 years that 35% of jobs have some aspect of their work role that can be done in a place other than a dedicated work location. So these are changes that we've seen, especially in the last 2 years, have resulted in new and different expectations of where and how people work with each other. So have a think about for a moment in the last month, what's been your experience of where you've been working? For some people, it's entirely at a work site, such as an office, and there's no remote work that people are undertaking. For other people, it might be all remote, that they have continued or remain in a work environment where they don't have to attend or turn up to a place of work. Another option might be those of you who are working in a hybrid way, that is potentially sometime at a workplace during the week and sometime remotely. So we've found in very recent months, this is some survey work we did early in 2022, the proportion of people that indicated where they were in terms of work. And you can see out of our sample, the clear majority, 58% of people were working in a hybrid model. That's where they're working at least 2 days, 2 or 3 days on a work location and somewhere between 2 or 3 days away from a workplace. So that seems to be, for a number of people, a common or very common occurrence. 34% were reporting that they were working entirely remotely, and in our sample, 8% of people reported they were turning up full-time to a work location. So with that, those differences and also the newness of hybrid work for a number of people that were not engaged in that before 2020, has definitely been some shift in what people are looking for in a work and also what organisations might be expecting of people at work. And indeed, this week I was speaking with an international business that said prior to the COVID pandemic, the expectation was everyone turned up to the workplace 5 days a week, and now it's just accepted and understood that they have a hybrid work model with a maximum of 2 days a week where people are coming together in the workplace. So these are all the sorts of things that are new, but it's also resulted in a number of observations about people's decisions and where they're working. And we've also hearing and seeing a lot of talk about titles in articles such as the Great Resignation or the Great Reshuffle. And what I've got on screen here is we did a bit of a summary and an analysis of the headlines that were in media and industry media, really commenting on what are people doing with respect to their current work, what sort of change is occurring. And the larger the word on the screen there, the more often it was referred to as part of changes that have resulted coming out of the pandemic. So the Great Resignation is often quoted or commented in a lot of international literature, or sometimes referred to as the Great Reshuffle. What is interesting is when we look at the most recent jobs data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the actual Great Resignation at this point hasn't played out in Australia. And in fact, it's led other people to say it's not the Great Resignation for Australian workplaces, but in actual fact, the Great Shift Storm was one phrase that I heard, meaning things have still changed. And what we're seeing is people are now making decisions about, do I continue working where I am or with who I'm working, and do I consider doing something completely different or working somewhere different? And to add to our thinking with some recent research from McKinsey & Co, they published some survey findings towards the end of 2021, where they actually said that people are now expecting, or a new set of expectations has emerged of what people want or need to accept full-time employment with a traditional employer, as opposed to maybe choosing to work for themselves or work with a non-traditional employer. And you can see the finding there, while workers are demanding and receiving higher compensation at this point in time, many of them also want more flexibility, to be part of a community and an inclusive culture. So where is this coming from? Well, again, from their interviews and survey work, they found that people are willing to make changes if they are not feeling part of something where there's some flexibility and inclusion. And this comes about because the cost of swapping jobs or switching jobs is now a lot less for many people, in particular people who have professions or skills that are in high demand. There's a minimal cost to switching. And a lot of people have said that they've observed friends or colleagues making changes without much pain in their life. And we can all probably see where the current unemployment figures are. That also means that there is demand for employees. Other reasons why people are not accepting full-time jobs with traditional employers include their experience of working with leaders who were uncaring or having unsustainable expectations about their work performance in the last couple of years. Many of those people who've had that experience have switched and moved to situations where they feel leadership is more supportive. And a third reason highlighted was people experience changes in their mental health, whether it's feelings of burnout or stress, or in fact, there was a change in expectation around family care demands, or some people have decided during the course of the last 2 years that it was more important to work where they felt a sense of purpose. And if their current work wasn't offering that, they have made choices to look for work and employment where that happens. So McKinsey basically summarized that today's workers are hungry to work in places where they feel trusted, where they feel included, and where there's a sense of purpose. And in fact, we had an experience where we saw a client organization of a large international subsidiary working here in Australia. Half of their executive team, who had joined in 2019, had decided to leave the business by 2021, many of them citing similar reasons that are on screen there. So maybe to bring it back to our own personal experience of what we feel when it comes to inclusion or not being included. So this is for personal reflection. Maybe everyone just think about a time when you felt your ideas, your contributions, and your voice mattered with the people that you work with. And if you can pinpoint a time where that was happening for you, how did it actually make you feel? How did it actually influence what you did at work in terms of your performance or your commitment to what you were working on? So I'll give everyone a moment to reflect on that. And for those who can pinpoint it, it might be worth even noting down for yourself what the experience was that made you feel included and also its effect for you. Of course, some people might be able to reflect on situations or a time where they felt others did not consider or value their ideas, or didn't acknowledge their contributions, or it felt like that what they shared, their voice didn't matter. So how does that make you feel if you've had that experience at work? What did that mean for your expectations, your view of what you wanted to contribute at work, but also the relationships that you had with the people around you? Now, to give us some objective outcomes of what it might be, some consequences of feeling included or not included, some research conducted by Juliet Burke, who's at the University of New South Wales, she really honed in on the implications of people feeling included or not included at work. And from her research, where she identified people who were not included or reported they didn't feel included, some of the outcomes were that these folks were 3 times less likely to have their views or their contributions endorsed or acknowledged either by their leader or their colleagues. And this was through direct observation, even in team meetings. Those who were less included were less likely to have their ideas or their contributions endorsed or acknowledged by the people they work with. People who don't feel included feel their voice or contributions are weaker compared to their colleagues, and that's even if what they were contributing was a valid point or a valid position to share. And some would actually withhold sharing those valid points. A number of people reported that when they didn't feel like they fit in or weren't included, to try and deal with it, they would adopt a persona at work. That is, to not show their authentic personality. It's a bit like playing a role, and they were not revealing or sharing the best parts of who they actually were. Probably no surprise that people who don't feel included are more likely to withhold their ideas or suggestions because they're unlikely to be acknowledged. And for some people where they didn't feel included, they simply left. These are real outcomes for people who, for whatever reason, might feel that their colleagues or their leader are not including them. And the implications didn't just sit with the individual. From that research, they found, in actual fact, that teams where members of the team didn't feel included underperformed in terms of objective outcomes of their team, and also they were more likely to engage in groupthink, basically accepting the ideas, thoughts, or decisions of those in the team who felt the most included. And of course, there's numerous situations throughout history where groupthink has really caused some major problems. So if any of you are in a role where you do have responsibility for leadership, it's worth reflecting on, can any team or any organization afford to have people feeling like this if they're not included? What are some of the benefits, though, of inclusive workplaces? And again, there's a growing number of studies and research pointing to the benefits of workplaces where people feel included. And we've got a sample of some of the findings from multiple research groups. You can see that the benefit for inclusive organizations is that they actually were more effective than competitors at capturing new markets or expanding their offerings into wider and more diverse client groups. And a lot of that came from incorporating diversity of their employees to work out ways to capture new markets. Inclusive workplaces are found to be more profitable than less inclusive, to actually make more effective or better decisions, as in considering different perspectives. And also there is some research showing that inclusive workplaces support innovation more than non-inclusive workplaces. So there are some business reasons to pay attention to the importance of inclusion. What did the research also find about what it's like for people who do feel included in their work? Well, first of all, most of those folks reported that they felt their colleagues, their leaders treated them with respect and fairly, that they felt they belonged and were valued at their place of work. They feel confident to contribute and share their perspectives and suggestions at work. And at the team level, teams that reported where they felt included and part of it reported that they had higher levels of trust with each other, which meant they were willing to talk about challenging or difficult issues, that members of the team expressed more discretionary effort. They were willing to go beyond what their own individual job role might expect and to contribute to the wider team efforts. And also those teams were found to be able to bring more divergent thinking so that they had more creative solutions. So a bit like looking at what is the trade-off of not feeling included, what are the benefits where your people feel included? Here are some important ones. So when we think about inclusion, it's become a hot topic. It's become a widely thought about and discussed topic, and particularly with respect to the importance of identifying the value of diversity in the workplace, also how workplaces can become more equitable, but also inclusive. And when we think about inclusion, it's really looking at the diversity of people that are working together, and also how well leaders acknowledge and support that diversity. Now, diverse employees can refer to any number of characteristics that differentiate people. For example, the most common or most discussed topics of diversity usually center around age, gender, ethnicity, even professional or job role diversity. What we're going to look at in our session is an equally important aspect of diversity, which is diversity of thought. But it's not always as obvious to pick up on diversity of thought as some of those other characteristics. So what is diversity of thought? It's where we recognize that people differ in how they interpret the same situation or information, and they differ in how they prefer to make decisions or what they base their decisions on. Now, much of this happens in our minds, which is not obvious to those people that we work with. And if we think about the model of what's above the waterline, what's observable and what's less observable below the waterline, it's often easy or easier to observe people's work styles. That usually comes through in the behaviors of how they conduct themselves at work or with the people they're working with. Personality is somewhat below the waterline. There are parts of our personality that are not always demonstrated through our behavior at work. So that can be a hidden force around diversity of thought. Also, values that people have, they are not always clearly articulated, but they might show up in certain decisions. People's experiences, including life learning or personal experiences, will shape how they think about things. And then there is a diversity of different thinking styles. So what becomes important is how do we reveal or make the less conscious parts of those elements more available to the people we work with, or how do leaders encourage an understanding of those different thinking styles? And maybe something for everyone to consider for ourselves is how much and how often are we asked to share our perspectives, and how do we feel if we feel valued for our individual contributions, or for using the best parts of our personality, or going about our work in a way that matches our work style. So this is where leaders play a role in potentially motivating or demotivating people based on appreciating or recognizing the different thoughts and experiences and personality styles that people bring to work. And if we took the scenario of a team here with 4 different members, each member, based on their thinking approach, their personality and their life experience, might have different expectations of what they like to be recognized and appreciated for. One member of the team might report that they like building systems and executing projects successfully, and they ultimately want to be recognized for being competent. Another member of a team might report that they like to be able to bring the team to focus on practical bottom line issues, and they appreciate being recognized for being grounded and offering thinking around data. Another team member might find that what they feel most equipped to do or what they do best is help customers or other people with practical help, and they want to be valued for the practical support they offer others. And still another team member might value being appreciated and recognized in an organization where what the business or the company values and its vision aligns with their own values, and that they can demonstrate those values at work. And we can sometimes be left guessing, what are these different ways people like to be appreciated and recognized? What we have on screen there are references back to a personality framework that we often use as part of leadership and team development to help people understand these different ways they like to appreciate and recognize. And the personality framework we are referring to there is the Myers-Briggs type indicator, or MBTI. And what we're highlighting here is people with different personality preferences, what they will often or typically value being appreciated and recognized for. So something for leaders to consider is how they personally might want to be appreciated and recognized may not be for the same way or same things or same way that the people they're leading. So inclusive workplaces we are seeing start with leadership. And in actual fact, researchers found that leaders account for approximately 70% of the inclusive behaviors in the workplace. That meaning they influence other people's behavior around inclusion. And this highlights that leaders are central to the experience of people at work around inclusion. If a leader is demonstrating inclusion, others are likely to experience it. If a leader demonstrates being less inclusive, or worse, to be exclusive of certain people, that will filter through the wider team and ultimately wider workplace. So inclusive workplaces are all about keeping individuals and people, their differences and their diversity of thought front and center. When it comes to inclusive leadership, there are some clear expectations or behaviors that inclusive leaders demonstrate. First of all, it's about acknowledging and honoring and incorporating different ways that people think, different personality preferences, different ways that people work, the different ideas that people can offer or draw on, and the different values that people have. So leaders need to be aware not only that these differences might exist between the people they're leading, but how do they honor the needs of those different styles and preferences, and how do they draw on it and incorporate it to make decisions and to undertake actions that are for mutual benefit. And by mutual benefit, we're really talking about not only does the team or the individual or the leader benefit from incorporating those styles, but other members of the business or organization benefit from it, and ultimately people who benefit from that organization, the customers or people receiving the services. I had one manager say to me after looking at those points about what it takes to be an inclusive leader, that seems like a big order, a tall ask for many leaders to do that, and something that's going to take a lot more time and a lot more effort on behalf of leaders to do that. Is it realistic? And so then we revisited, well, what does that mean if people don't feel included by their leaders? And we reflected on some of the points that we shared earlier. It's not easy for leaders to do this, but the risk of not doing it is a lot more detrimental. So for that particular manager, he had to decide for himself, was he up for taking on a leadership role that required this? So what we wanted to share here is some recommendations from our work with organizations as to how to establish and build inclusive workplaces based on what leaders do. And here's recommendation 1. So inclusive leadership needs to start with the most influential people in the organization. And that's because they set the tone, they set the agenda, they set the cultural norms around what inclusion looks like. But simply setting a vision or an aspirational statement about inclusive leadership is not enough. It just won't shift attitudes or behaviors, or even role model attitudes and behaviors just by having statements about it. So what leaders monitor, or what they demonstrate in front of their employees, and what they reward is actually what people are going to experience around, is this an inclusive place or not? So leaders at all levels need to create development plans that span across all levels of leadership and set the expectations, but also what does inclusive leadership look like? Why are we doing this? For the senior leaders, they are, again, setting the vision, the tone of why inclusion is important. And what we actually find is, as you get further into the organization, the frontline leaders, though, are the ones that have the most influence over the day-to-day experience of whether employees feel like they're being included or not. And of course, frontline leaders take their cues from their leaders as well. So it really is an organizational wide approach. It's not something that resides at just one level of leadership. So think about your organization. How well does it set the tone, the expectations, but also demonstrate the day-to-day behaviors that inclusion is important? Second recommendation is leaders need to really understand for themselves, what does it mean to be an inclusive leader, and how do we bring it to life? And so what we have identified through a number of years of our research, but also from our consulting experience, is 8 core competencies that support or relate to inclusive leadership behavior. And I won't go through the detail of all 8, but to start at the top of the tree, we have humility is an important attribute that inclusive leaders display. Curiosity and learning and wanting to know more, even if it comes across as something different for the leader, is important. Remaining open to different perspectives, different views, different opinions. Also leveraging differences. Simply acknowledging that there's difference is not being inclusive. It's how do you draw on the benefit of the difference. Demonstrating empathy and a desire and an intent to understand where other people are coming from. Courage is about taking steps to do things that might feel uncomfortable or unnatural. Flexibility is accommodating and incorporating other people's different ways of doing things. But probably the main starting point for the leaders out of the 8 competencies is self-awareness. And that is, how inclusive is a leader? So what we're highlighting here is, it's not enough to ask or recommend or say leaders need to be inclusive. Give them some tangible ways and behaviors that underpin inclusion. And so we've done this through developing a leadership development program that centers on helping leaders build their inclusion skills. And a starting point here, which is recommendation 3, is you have to give leaders an opportunity to assess where do they see they are naturally built, or where are their natural strengths for being inclusive, and where is there a bit more of a stretch. And a reminder here is all these behaviors can be learned or developed. So here's a sample of one of our self-assessment questionnaires on how inclusive a leader is. And we get them to reflect on it and to also assess where they think their strengths and their stretches are. And having done that, we can help them identify from those behaviors how they tie back to the 8 competencies. Where I've found it particularly useful assessment and tool is not only where leaders assess themselves, but where they also invite their co-workers or the people they're leading to give them some feedback about where they see the leader's strengths and stretches there. And that then helps leaders identify what they're going to continue doing, but also what they might need to do differently. Now, following that assessment, it's important to provide focused and targeted learning opportunities where leaders can start to practice and experiment with different ways of leading that support inclusive leadership. And what I have here on screen is a very high-level summary of an inclusive leadership program that we deliver for organizations, which starts with leaders being clear about who they are, both from a personality point of view, but also those where they sit with the leadership competencies for inclusion. And then we take them through a guided program pathway of multiple sessions. And the reason we find multiple sessions is important is one learning event is not going to help a leader shift the dial on being more inclusive. Also through these sessions, we have leaders working with each other where they can start to experience the different thinking styles, the different personality preferences, and how they show up in work behaviours. So for any of you who are interested in looking at more how this leadership program would work, towards the end of our webinar today, Vicky will share with you some information and resources that can help you follow up how you might look at that program for your situation. The other thing we become a lot more mindful of is the impact of in-group and out-group dynamics. Now, this is not new to human behavior. As long as humans have been on the planet, there has been situations where people feel part of being an in-group or the out-group. And it really goes back to ancient tribes. Are we in the tribe or are we excluded from the tribe? Inclusive leaders identify and address situations that may result in in-group and out-group dynamics. And sometimes it's overt and easy to see, other times it's more hidden. Now, whilst in-group and out-group dynamics have existed since human beings have been around, what we're seeing is the world of hybrid work that more and more people are now engaging in presents new risks for in and out groups to form. And here are some things, again, if you're in a leadership role, to consider or to pay attention to establish, are some in and out groups forming with the people that you're working with. So when we think about hybrid work, when and where do you schedule meetings and collaboration activities at work? Are you scheduling it at times that where everyone who needs to be and wants to be part of it can participate together? Or is it being scheduled more at times just to get the work done? And sometimes people might be excluded. Who interacts in person with the group the most and who interacts the least? Who has opportunities to attend sessions and who has less opportunity to do that? And is it stacked in favor of certain people being there or contributing simply because they are close by or in person? Sometimes known as the proximity bias. Those we just bump into or interact with more often, we tend to pay more attention to. And how transparent is the thinking behind decisions that affect how people work together? Are those decisions based on how a leader just focuses on the people that they spend the most time with? Or are the decisions based on incorporating different thinking styles, different personality preferences? So again, these are some questions as leaders you can consider. Are there things that are currently going on that might create out-group dynamics? And as I said, those who are in the out-group often feel those consequences of not being included. Something that I've become a lot more aware of, particularly through the last 2 years, is if we are working in hybrid conditions with each other, it's important to have an understanding of when do we bring everyone together in person and when do we undertake work completely remotely. And what I've found is a hybrid tip. If you're going to have an important meeting or work on an important project, you need to make a decision together. Is everyone going to be present in person? And if they can't, then everyone should be working all remotely. Where the challenge arises is if you have some people in person in a room and others joining that meeting online, the power dynamic and the level of influence between those in the room and outside of the room does shift. So maybe reflect on some of the meetings or situations where you're working together and how to balance either being all in person or all remote. The other key concept that maybe underpins all of the elements of inclusion is creating a psychologically safe place for people to work. And some of you may have seen this concept, this topic, because it's taking a lot more prominence in recent times. And Amy Edmondson from Harvard has been the sort of main pioneer and researcher to really highlight the importance of what does psychological safety mean. So here she's describing it's where everyone believes it's safe for interpersonal risk-taking with the people that they work with. And what we do know is that psychological safety is initially established by leaders. Leaders, again, have the greatest influence as to whether the people they're working with feel like they can take interpersonal risks or not. So the leaders who've been found to be the most effective in creating safety do this by some very clear behaviors. First of all, these leaders share what's working for them and working for the team, but they also highlight as a leader what mistakes they've made and what they've learned from it. Again, that sends a message to the team, we're here to learn, and if mistakes happen, we're here to learn from them, not hide them. Psychologically safe leaders show curiosity when workers share things with them. Even if what's being shared, a leader might find confronting, challenging, puzzling, or a leader might even disagree with what the co-worker is saying, they still show curiosity and want to understand more. Being present with co-workers is also an essential ingredient of demonstrating psychological safety. And in particular, a lot of employees said when their leader didn't really pay attention, that is, they were distracted either by an incoming call in the middle of a meeting or in an online meeting, responding to emails or messages that came up, or in person, just not paying attention to the conversation that's occurring in front of them, these leaders were sending messages that it's not psychologically safe. So think about what distractions could occur when you're having those discussions or interactions with your team. And finally, leaders who built psychological safety framed problems as a learning challenge, not as a problem that has to be fixed, and if it isn't, there's dire consequences, but in actual fact, everyone has a part to play in solving the problem, and presenting as a learning challenge increases people's openness and motivation to do that. So I encourage you to think about, as leaders, what are things that you might do that send the message it's psychologically safe? And here are some questions to reflect on from a leadership perspective. When have you felt safe to speak up with the people you work with or with your leader? How comfortable are you sharing a problem and asking for help from your teammates or your co-workers? When have you felt not safe to do this, and what was the outcome for you, and maybe what was the outcome for the wider team or group? And when it comes to making decisions about when to interact or share with each other, or when to bring people together to solve problems, think about, are we focusing on efficiency and productivity over trust, creativity, and collaboration? Whilst it might feel easy and make sense to call a quick meeting or to solve a problem through written online interactions, does it actually build safety where trust, creativity, and collaboration are encouraged? So there's some questions to reflect on. Now, some of you are probably saying, well, what does it look like when a team, a group, or an organization want to embark on building inclusive leadership. So I wanted to share with you a case study of an organization we've been working with recently. This was the executive team of an FMCG business, an Australian subsidiary of a large multinational organization. And the executive team comprised 7 senior managers, 4 of who joined in 2021, right in the midst of going between lockdowns and out of lockdowns. And so many of these, or at least more than half of the team, were new to working with each other. As part of the background, they actually, as a business, had a spike, an increase in their sales due to the products and services that they were offering to people during the pandemic. But they also were facing a restructure of internal warehousing and logistics processes. They also were faced with restricted supply chain, both receiving and distributing the goods that they offer. And they identified that there were some underlying internal conflict between departments. So the CEO of this organization really wanted to bring the executive team together to not only build an aligned way of working with each other, because she recognized that it's the leaders who build the alignment, not other levels of the organization, but also to build an inclusive team where the executive team felt they could collaborate. So we worked with them over a number of weeks and months throughout 2021 and even into the start of 2022. Some things that we did to help them build inclusion with each other, and it started with helping them learn about their own personality, style, and preferences using the Myers-Briggs type indicator model. And you can see it helped them identify where each member of the team sits with respect to their personality. Also, what that means when you bring the different personality preferences of the team together. So we help them explore their personality preferences, what the contributions of each team member would be in the team, but also where the team might share some common strengths and potential common blind spots. And what really helped the team build the inclusion with each other was they worked on identifying agreed actions of using those learning and insights from that model with each other and how they work together as a team. We also introduced to them a model of interpersonal needs that play out in any situation where people interact with another person. And this model comes from the FIRO assessment, the fundamental interpersonal relationship orientation behaviours. This model and assessment's been used quite extensively in leadership and team development, and it measures 3 interpersonal needs. The first of which is, to what extent does a person need or want to be involved or included within a group activity? The next need is looking at, to what extent does a person need or want to have influence with the people that they're interacting with or in the team that they're part of? And the third important interpersonal need is, to what extent does a person want to build close, supportive relationships with the people that they're working with? And what we highlighted is that each person might have different levels of need where each of those 3 areas is satisfied. But if they're aware of those different levels of need, it minimizes misunderstanding. It also helps incorporate different ways of interpersonally interacting and honoring that in an inclusive way. So what did this team and organization do to actually build inclusive leadership, not only amongst their team, but with their staff? So here are some practical ways we help them set things up. First of all, the CEO and the executive team scheduled individual, what we call pair and share sessions, where they took the learning from the sessions that we ran with them to not only explore their different personality and thinking styles, but what might be some biases that creep in and how to counteract those biases. The team shared and compared their feedback about effectiveness, their own individual self-rated effectiveness around inclusive leadership, but to really give some validity to those self-assessments, the CEO and the executive team open themselves up to gaining feedback from the wider organization about how inclusive they were as individual leaders and as a team, and also what needed to happen to build more inclusion for those staff who felt not included. Now, the good news is it's ongoing for this team. Again, it's not a set and forget activity, but they have actually moved the dial in terms of how inclusive they are seen to be as a leadership team. And what we've found is that they've continued to explore how to incorporate different perspectives, not only within the team, but from outside of the team. So the final recommendation here to consider is something that all of us can do on a day-to-day basis and really provides the bedrock of whether we're demonstrating inclusion or not. I'm framing it here more around as what leaders can reflect on, but the micro behaviors are things that we do on a day-to-day basis with people. So as a leader, consider, do I spend more time with some people in my team or my group than others? And what is the effect on those that I spend less time with? What's being lost or what might be missing? Do I endorse or acknowledge some people's contributions more in a meeting or a project? And those that I don't endorse or acknowledge, what happens to their contributions? Do I consciously seek out the views of people who I feel are different to me? Do I make an attempt to actually look at perspectives or consider perspectives that I wouldn't have normally considered? And one way of doing that is to look for people who are very different. And how do I usually respond when someone shares a view I don't agree with or a view that I find challenging to accept? Am I more likely to try and just accept it or reject it, or find ways to explain why my position or my view is more correct? So think about and pay attention to those micro inclusion behaviours. So to bring our session now to some takeaways, hopefully this sparks your thinking about what are some of the things that in leadership and organisations today we need to consider. There are new expectations that people have about their work and where they're going to work. We looked at the outcomes of inclusion and also the outcomes of feeling excluded at work and what that impact might be for individuals and organisations. The importance of considering inclusion through the lens of diversity of thinking. What it means to be an inclusive leader and what are some of the core competencies that support that kind of leadership. We looked at why psychological safety matters and actually underpins inclusion. And finally, how inclusive leadership is developed and demonstrated. And Vicky will share with you some other things that might add to your thinking from what we've shared in the webinar today. But a final thought I'd like to leave everyone with. What would happen if you and your colleagues not only felt included, but you felt you belonged and you mattered in the workplace and with the people you work with? Belonging is a higher level of inclusion. And what does it mean if people don't feel like they belong where they work? What's the risk? What's the lost opportunity that's there? So appreciate you spending time with us on our webinar today. And I'm hoping there's some things of value or interest. So I'll now actually turn over to Vicky, who's got some other things to share with you.
Thanks, Martin, for a great session. We might be a little bit short on time for questions, but if we hopefully can go to questions, I just wanted to let you know about a few of our up and coming certification courses that we've got happening. So this is for anybody who might be interested in bringing in-house the work of the Myers-Briggs type indicator. So we've got both virtual and in-person events scheduled for the remainder of the year. In-person events being in June for Melbourne and in November for Sydney. We've also got some virtual events. So in July, the 4th and the 5th and the 7th of 8th for anybody in Hong Kong. And then also in August for, again, the Melbourne Australian time zone. We've also got a range of other programs, including for emotional intelligence, 360 feedback and career counselling on offer, which you can find and book via our website. We've also got consulting services where one of our experienced consultants like Martin can get to know your organization and design and deliver a customized solution to meet your business requirements. This year, we've had a call for both virtual and in-person sessions for both team and leadership development with a focus on inclusive leadership. So if this is something you're interested in learning more about, please do get in touch. Um, as I mentioned earlier, we do have some complimentary resources for you, which we'll be sending out to everybody who has registered for this webinar. These include the Inclusion Delusion 3-page report and also the 10 keys to successful leadership development. You can also find these on our website, so feel free to have a peruse around there. And whilst we've got you just in this last couple of minutes, we'd love to get your feedback on this webinar. So please feel free to scan this QR code and fill out the survey. And yeah, we'll also send a link to you through via email. We're bang on 1:30, so unfortunately I don't think we do have any time for questions. But again, thanks so much for joining us for this webinar. As I mentioned, we'll be following up with a recording and the notes from today's webinar over the next few days in an email. So thank you for attending, and thanks again, Martin, for your presentation.
Thanks, Vicky, and thanks everyone for joining.